For more, I'm joined by Marc Ross. He's founder of the business advisory firm Caracal Strategies. So 1 month in, many people thought we wouldn't see where we are right now. But what do you think all sides have learned from this so far?
Well, it depends what you mean by all sides. I think there are multiple
sides. The Chinese side, the U.S. side, and all these multinational companies who are tied up in this.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's multiple sides to this, as you point out, and even within each country. And as your reporter just mentioned, around the world, there are factories in Germany that are being impacted. Business in Mexico. It was a very interesting situation we find ourselves in. In fact, at the beginning of the spring, I didn't think we'd be here and made a prediction.
You and many others.
Made a prediction that we continue a dialogue. But it looks like we're in a pretty bad situation. You have two serious nationalistic governments in both Beijing and DC that are really staying true to what they want to do, staying true to their constituencies, and really want to fight this using words like war, enduring. This is a pretty hard time right now.
We know that the Chinese stock market has seen the effect of this. U.S. stock market, not so much. Consumers, I don't know if they're really feeling anything yet. How long before people start feeling the impact of this trade war and start putting pressure on lawmakers and other people to make something happen, to get to the table?
Yeah, I think looking at the stock market is an indicator of the success or failure of this tariff is probably not the right way to go. There's so many other variables in that. But to your point, I do think going into this election season, certainly here in the U.S., you'll see a lot more engagement, not only from farmers, but also from businesses getting involved in elections, making the case that these tariffs aren't the right approach to solving kind of global trade frictions, if you will. And even if there is a short-term resolution in the 2018 election, there's no doubt that this issue is going to go into 2020. So in some situations, this is a 2 to 3 year problem, which I'm sure a lot of politicians don't really want to address. But in the short term, these tariffs are only creating long-term problems, and how we get out of here is going to be the biggest challenge.
You mentioned the midterm elections in the United States, which are coming up, and there's been some talk, people out there in Washington who think this is just sort of a tactic to get through the elections, and then once they're over, maybe get back to the table and kind of pull back on some of the rhetoric. Do you think that's
well, just this weekend, on Saturday, Trump was in the great state of Ohio saying that, he likes to play hardball. This is like his MO. This is what he's all about. He's the deal maker. But is China going to, what is China supposed to do? I mean, how fast are they supposed to open the market? The interesting thing while all this is going on, and you're going to probably allude to this, Starbucks is doing quite interesting stuff in China. They made a major investment. They made an interesting deal with Alibaba. You have Tesla committing to the market. You have J&J investing in a Chinese startup. It's quite an interesting situation, what to believe. Certainly, Trump is trying to tell people, I think at the end of the day, he really wants to break up the world-based trade association, the WTO, and kind of the rules of the road for the last 20, 30 years, and is telling his troops, hey, let's stick through it. Beijing is a more interesting situation because in some ways, they don't nearly import as much stuff as they do export. And at the end of the day, they're really at the heart of a global kind of supply chain that assembles a lot of products, not only for Chinese companies, but Japanese companies, Korean companies, Mexican companies, German companies, et cetera. That's going to also put pressure on the rest of the world.
Well, you mentioned, Starbucks, but there are other companies like Apple. So if all of a sudden we're seeing Apple products cost a lot more around Christmas time, I don't know if Americans will make a point of that. But when it comes to business leaders and CEOs and industry leaders who had the farming associations and some of these manufacturing associations, how much of an influence are they having, or are they not at all on the process?
I don't think they're having. They're definitely talking, right, behind closed doors. They're definitely chatting on Capitol Hill. They're talking to folks in the White House. But I think you'll see more pressure. I'm certainly advising my clients that they have to get much more active on the campaign trail, kind of thought leadership pieces, getting more engaged in this debate. I would expect you're going to see a lot more of that because at the end of the day, speaking of Apple, which is kind of interesting, the race to $1 trillion, 20% of Apple's revenue is now being generated just in China itself. If you enjoy that share price and want to see that company continue to expand, you're going to want to see more Chinese consumers buying Apple products. So it's not only a tit for tat and a multi-tangle kind of situation with multiple sides, but there's really two big issues that we're fighting here. Is it tariffs? It's also a fight against kind of global supply chains, which I don't think we fully have grasped the real issue behind that.
All right, Marc Ross, always here to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
1 month in.